I spent 18 months fighting for my life. Not a single family member showed up. Not my daughter, not my son-in-law, not even my granddaughter. But out of nowhere, Caroline appeared at the gates of my brand new estate in Charleston. A sprawling $3.5 million historic home I had inherited from my late cousin. When I opened the door, I calmly spoke 3 words. "So you came. Follow my story until the end and tell me the city you're watching from. I want to know just how far my words will travel, because the truth about family betrayal should never be buried." 18 months. 540 days of hospitals, heart monitors, and quiet nights where I wondered if I would see the sun again. I'm 64 years old, and I thought I understood loneliness. I thought widowhood had taught me enough. I was wrong. Real loneliness is lying in a cardiac ICU bed with tubes in your chest while the man in the next room has 3 children sitting vigil, and the woman across the hall has her church choir singing softly by her window. My room? Just the beep of machines. The diagnosis came in late spring. Heart failure, complicated by years of stress and high blood pressure. "You'll need surgery," the cardiologist said gently. "And afterward, a strong support system." Support system. The words almost made me laugh. Who did I have? Caroline, my only child, had long ago built her own shiny life with her husband, Daniel. They lived just 40 minutes away, in a glass-walled home that looked like something from a design magazine. They had their daughter, Lily, 11 years old now, with ballet recitals and private school. I was supposed to be part of that picture. But somewhere along the way, Caroline decided her mother was a burden, not a blessing. I still tried. I dialed her number from my hospital bed the night before my surgery. My fingers trembled as I pressed call. "Mom, I'm in the middle of something. Can you text me?" She answered, irritation sharp in her tone. "Caroline, it's important," I whispered. "They're saying I need open-heart surgery tomorrow morning." Silence. Then a clipped reply. "Well, you'll be in good hands. I'll try to stop by next week if I can fit it in. Daniel's working on a big case and Lily has rehearsals." She hung up before I could even say I was scared. I laid there staring at the ceiling tiles, realizing for the first time that my own daughter wouldn't even sit in a waiting room while I was on the operating table. The surgery happened on a Tuesday. I woke up groggy, pain blooming in my chest, and reached instinctively for a familiar hand. There was none. The nurse, a kind woman named Angela, smiled and tucked my blanket around me. "Family on their way?" she asked softly. I lied. "Yes, they'll be here soon." But no one came. Recovery was slow. Weeks of cardiac rehab, relearning how to breathe deeply, how to climb stairs, how to walk down hallways without fainting. Each day, I watched other patients cheered on by children and spouses. I learned their families' names because I heard them so often. Meanwhile, no one even texted to ask if I was eating. At night, the silence in my small house pressed against me like a weight. I would sit in the kitchen with a mug of tea, staring at the empty chair across from me, pretending that if I looked hard enough, my late husband Robert would reappear. He'd been gone 7 years. Some nights I spoke out loud just so I wouldn't forget what my own voice sounded like. I reached out again months later when I had a frightening dizzy spell. I called Daniel this time, thinking maybe my son-in-law would manage what my daughter could not. He picked up on speakerphone, his voice slick with rehearsed confidence. "Eleanor, hey, I'm with a client. Can we make this quick?" "I think I might need to go back to the hospital," I said weakly. Well, call an ambulance then, don't wait around. We'll check in soon, okay?" And he was gone. Soon never came. By the time I completed rehab, I'd accepted the truth. I was invisible to them. I mailed birthday cards to Lily that were never acknowledged. I left voicemails that were never returned. The only proof I had of my daughter's existence was the occasional glossy holiday photo that arrived in my mailbox. Perfect smiles, coordinated outfits, a family that had no room for me. Then came the letter. It was from a law firm in Charleston, heavy cream envelope with my name written in a hand that wasn't mine. I almost tossed it aside, certain it was junk. But curiosity made me slit it open. My cousin Margaret, distant, older, complicated Margaret, had passed away unexpectedly. We hadn't spoken much in the last decade, not since a squabble over family heirlooms. But there it was in black and white. She had left everything to me. Everything. The letter listed her holdings. A 3-story antebellum estate in the historic district of Charleston, appraised at $3.5 million. Antique furniture collections dating back to the 1800s. Investment accounts and life insurance policies. Enough to change my entire future. I sat in my kitchen clutching the letter, tears sliding silently down my face. The cousin I'd once argued with had reached across the years and given me more support in death than my own daughter had shown me in life. 2 months later, a moving truck pulled away from my old neighborhood, leaving behind the small house where Robert and I had raised Caroline, where I'd eaten meals alone for years, where I'd recovered from open-heart surgery with no one to drive me home. The estate in Charleston was like stepping into another world. White columns rose proudly at the entrance, ivy creeping up red brick walls. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon polish and old books. Floor-to-ceiling windows let in golden light that danced across chandeliers. Each room carried history, portraits of stern ancestors, hand-woven rugs, cabinets filled with crystal. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I began each morning with coffee on the wide veranda, listening to the distant sound of church bells mingling with the cries of seagulls. I planted flowers in Margaret's neglected garden, found comfort in the rhythm of pruning roses and sweeping leaves. I joined the local library, walked cobblestone streets, and for the first time since Robert died, felt something close to peace. I told no one, especially not Caroline. I wanted this one thing to be mine, untainted by her absence, her excuses, her husband's slick smile. But secrets have a way of leaking. I'd been in Charleston 6 weeks when the knock came. It was a humid Thursday morning, the kind where the air feels thick enough to drink. I wasn't expecting anyone. I'd been careful to keep my new address private. Through the stained glass window of the front door, I saw a silhouette. A woman's shape, familiar, unwelcome. My heart raced, not from illness this time, but from dread. After 18 months of silence, what could possibly bring Caroline to my doorstep now? I opened the heavy oak door. There she was, my daughter, looking polished, expensive, like she'd stepped straight off a magazine cover. Her dress was designer, her heels sharp enough to scratch marble, and her lipstick was the exact shade of ambition. And on her face, that smile, the one she wore at Daniel's firm dinners, the one that never reached her eyes. "Mom," she exclaimed, spreading her arms as if we were long-lost friends. "Look, wonderful. I can't believe you didn't tell us about this gorgeous place." I didn't move to hug her. I simply studied her face, letting silence stretch. In 40 years, I'd learned to read Caroline better than she realized. Behind that smile, I saw calculation. "How did you find me?" I asked quietly. Her laugh tinkled like glass. "Oh, Daniel has his ways. May I come in? It's sweltering out here." I stepped aside, and as she crossed the threshold, her eyes began cataloging every detail. The crown moldings, the antique sideboard, the sweep of the staircase. She wasn't here for me. She was here for what Margaret had left. And though I didn't know it yet, she wasn't alone in her plan. Caroline's heels clicked across the polished floors as though she already owned them. She trailed her fingers along the mahogany banister, glanced up at the chandelier, and let out a low whistle. "Mom, this is incredible," she said, her voice warm, practiced. "You must be so happy here." I poured 2 glasses of sweet tea in the kitchen, more to buy myself time than out of courtesy. She perched on a bar stool, posture perfect, hands folded neatly in her lap like she was posing for a lifestyle magazine. "Why are you here, Caroline?" I asked, sliding a glass across the counter. She sighed dramatically, lowering her lashes. "I owe you such a huge apology. I know I wasn't present during your heart surgery. Daniel and I were overwhelmed with work, and Lily had so many commitments, and—" I held up a hand. "Don't dress it up, Caroline. You chose not to come." Her eyes flickered, but her smile never faltered. "We thought giving you space was best. We didn't want to burden you with our stress while you were healing." Space. That word again. They'd given me enough space to make me feel like a ghost. "How's Lily?" I asked, changing the subject. My granddaughter, 11 years old now, the girl I'd once braided hair for and taught to bake cookies. Caroline's smile brightened instantly, though it was the smile of someone selling a story. "She's thriving. Dance classes, violin, straight A's. She asks about you all the time." A lie, smooth as butter. If Lily asked, I hadn't heard about it once in 18 months. "Good," I said flatly. Caroline shifted in her seat, leaning forward as if she were about to confess. "Mom, I feel awful about not being there for you. Truly. Daniel and I talked about it and we want to make it right. We want to be involved again. Family should stick together. The word family dangled like a lure on a hook. But I knew Caroline. I saw the flicker of her eyes toward the antique china cabinet, the way she mentally tallied value. Her sudden reappearance wasn't about family. It was about fortune. Daniel arrived 2 days later. I was out in the rose garden when his silver Mercedes pulled into the gravel drive. He stepped out in a tailored navy suit despite the humid Charleston air, his tie knotted just so, his hair gleaming with product. Always the lawyer, even on a Saturday. "Eleanor," he said smoothly, extending his hand like we were business associates. "The house suits you, doesn't it?" I replied coolly. He walked with me toward the veranda, his eyes sweeping over the estate the way a predator surveys prey. "Caroline tells me you've settled in nicely. We're so relieved. After everything with your health, it's good to see you stable." That word again. Stable. As if I were a horse in a pasture. I offered him a seat and he launched into small talk. Lily's school, Caroline's volunteer work, his latest court victory. But woven into his words were threads of something darker. "You've been through a lot, Eleanor," he said, his tone heavy with false concern. "Major surgery, the stress of moving, all those medications. Sometimes the recovery process can be confusing for patients your age." My eyes narrowed. Confusing. He smiled like a doctor delivering bad news gently. "I just mean the body and mind go through a lot. Caroline and I want to make sure you're not overwhelmed. We're here to support you whatever you need." Support. From the same people who vanished when I needed them most. "I'm managing just fine," I said sharply. "Of course," he replied smoothly. "But if you ever find it's too much, don't hesitate to lean on us. After all, family looks out for each other." The words slid over me like oil, leaving behind only suspicion. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing his voice. Confusing, stable, lean on us. It wasn't concern, it was groundwork. And then the first whisper reached me. The next morning I walked to the corner cafe I'd begun frequenting. The barista, a young man named Caleb, handed me my coffee with a hesitant smile. "Everything okay, Miss Whitmore?" he asked carefully. "Yes, of course." "Why?" He shifted, uncomfortable. "Oh, nothing. It's just, your daughter stopped by yesterday. She mentioned you've been forgetful since your surgery. Said you sometimes get mixed up with dates and names. I just wanted to check in." My chest tightened. "She told you that?" Caleb looked flustered. "I didn't mean to pry. She said she was worried about you, that you might need neighbors keeping an eye out. I think she meant well." Meant well. Caroline had always been skilled at wrapping knives in silk. I walked home with trembling hands, coffee sloshing over the rim of the cup. Forgetful. Confused. Stable. The words lined up like dominoes. A week later, my neighbor Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly widow who'd lived on the street for decades, approached me at the mailbox. "Eleanor, honey, is everything all right?" she asked, her brows knitted. "I'm fine." "Why?" She hesitated. "Your son-in-law came by. Said he was concerned you'd been leaving your lights on all night and forgetting to lock doors. Asked if I'd noticed anything unusual." Anger burned in my chest. "And what did you tell him?" She lifted her chin. "I told him you're sharper than most folks half your age. That man had no business asking such questions." Bless her. But the damage was done. They were planting seeds everywhere. One evening, while sorting through Margaret's old desk drawers, I found something that made my blood run cold. A stack of glossy brochures. Each one advertising luxury assisted living facilities. They hadn't been mine. I hadn't requested them. Yet here they were, tucked beneath papers Caroline had helped me organize the week before. On the top brochure, in neat handwriting, was a note. Would provide 24/7 supervision. Safe transition for Eleanor. It wasn't my handwriting. It was Daniel's. That night, I dreamed I was back in the hospital bed, heart monitors beeping, but this time I wasn't alone. I was surrounded by lawyers with clipboards, whispering about whether I could sign my own name. I woke up drenched in sweat, clutching the sheets, the weight of betrayal pressing down heavier than any illness ever had. The final confirmation came from the most unexpected source. Angela, the kind nurse who'd cared for me after surgery. I ran into her at the farmer's market one Saturday, her basket filled with peaches. She hugged me warmly. "You look wonderful, Eleanor. How are you feeling?" Better every day, I smiled. Then, curiosity tugging, I asked, Angela, did anyone ever call the hospital asking about my mental state after surgery? Her expression tightened. Yes. Your daughter rang several times. Very concerned about possible cognitive side effects. Wanted to know if the doctors had noted confusion or poor judgment. My throat went dry. And what did you tell her? The truth, Angela said firmly. That you were one of the most compliant and alert patients we'd had. You asked excellent questions, remembered instructions better than anyone. She shook her head. I thought it was odd at the time, but now, well, I see what they were doing. So it was true. Caroline and Daniel weren't just absent. They were orchestrating something behind the scenes. Building a story where I was weak, confused, incapable. And I knew why. They weren't here for reconciliation. They weren't here for family. They were here to take control of everything Margaret had left me. And the most chilling part? They almost had everyone believing them. That evening, as the sun bled pink over Charleston's rooftops, I sat on the veranda with Margaret's old journal open in my lap. She had written about our family often, her looping handwriting fierce and clear. Money reveals who people truly are. Watch carefully, Ellie. Blood doesn't always mean loyalty. I traced the words with my finger, my heart pounding with the weight of their truth. Caroline and Daniel thought they were clever, planting whispers in cafes, neighbors' ears, even doctors' offices. But they had underestimated me. I wasn't weak. I wasn't confused. And I was about to prove it. I had spent nights turning the words over in my head. Confused, unstable, forgetful. They weren't slips of concern. They were rehearsed, planted like seeds. I decided to look for proof. Margaret's estate attorney, Mr. Lawson, had been handling the transfer of property and assets. A serious man with rimless glasses and a voice like gravel, he had grown used to my cautious questions. But when I visited his office on Broad Street that humid Monday morning, my tone carried a sharper edge. Mr. Lawson, I began, have you received any inquiries about my inheritance? Anyone asking about contesting it? He studied me over his spectacles. Why do you ask? Because my daughter and her husband have resurfaced, and they're spreading rumors that I'm incompetent. The word tasted bitter. Lawson leaned back, steepling his fingers. As a matter of fact, yes. About 3 weeks ago, your son-in-law reached out. Asked hypothetically about guardianship filings. Whether a beneficiary deemed mentally unfit could still manage inherited property. I informed him that the will was airtight. But it raised a flag. My stomach turned. Did he put anything in writing? Lawson slid open a drawer, withdrew a thin folder, and pushed it across the desk. Inside was a photocopy of an email. Daniel's tone was polite, almost academic. In cases where an elderly relative shows cognitive decline post-surgery, how does the law determine capacity? Could another family member step in for management? It was disguised as curiosity, but I recognized the strategy. He was laying groundwork. Thank you, I said, closing the folder with trembling hands. That's all I needed to see. At home, I began searching through the boxes Caroline had oh so helpfully unpacked for me. And there it was, a manila envelope tucked inside Margaret's roll-top desk. My name scrawled across the front in Daniel's handwriting. Inside were photocopies of what looked like medical evaluations, except they weren't mine. Each page listed cognitive impairment, decline in judgment, and recommendation for guardianship. The dates aligned with my hospital stay, but the signatures were blurred as though copied badly. I held the papers up to the light, my hands shaking. For a moment, rage blinded me. They had forged evidence. They had tried to put words in doctors' mouths, to build a case that I wasn't capable of running my own life. And if I hadn't found these, they might have used them. The next day, I confided in Helen Montgomery, my neighbor across the street, a retired teacher with sharp eyes and a sharper wit. She'd been one of the first to welcome me, dropping off lemon pound cake when I moved in. We sat on my veranda sipping iced tea as cicadas screamed in the distance. They're planning something, I told her, sliding the forged papers across the table. Helen adjusted her reading glasses, scanning the pages. Her frown deepened with each line. These aren't even good forgeries, she said finally. But they're dangerous. People believe paperwork. I need an ally, I whispered. Someone who can see me clearly, who won't fall for their lies. Helen patted my hand. You have me. And you should have a lawyer of your own, not just Margaret's. Someone who'll fight for you if this goes further. That's how I met Rachel Barnes. Rachel was 40, quick-tongued and relentless. She'd built her practice on defending seniors against financial exploitation. When Helen introduced us, Rachel's handshake was firm, her gaze unwavering. "Tell me everything," she said, flipping open a leather notebook. So I did. The abandonment, the sudden reappearance, the whispers in cafes and neighbors' ears, the brochures for assisted living, the forged evaluations. By the time I finished, Rachel's jaw was set. They're preparing a competency challenge, guardianship petitions, maybe even trying to contest your inheritance on the grounds of diminished capacity. But they don't have evidence. These forgeries, she tapped the papers, are sloppy. If anything, they'll backfire. But we're not waiting for them to strike. What do you suggest? I asked. First, documentation. Medical records, witness statements, anything that proves your capacity. Second, protection. We'll file a notice with the court preemptively, affirming your competence and your intent to retain control of your estate. Third, her eyes gleamed, we make it clear that any attempt to interfere will have consequences. Her confidence steadied me. For the first time, I didn't feel like prey. I began to prepare quietly. Angela, my nurse, signed a sworn statement attesting to my alertness during treatment. Mr. Lawson provided records showing I'd managed the estate transfer flawlessly. Helen and Mrs. Jenkins both wrote letters describing my sharpness in daily life. Even Caleb, the barista, volunteered. She remembers my schedule better than I do. Piece by piece, I built a fortress of proof. Meanwhile, Caroline and Daniel kept circling. They visited on weekends, bringing Lily along as if parading her innocence could soften me. Lily would twirl in the parlor, showing off ballet moves, while her parents exchanged loaded glances over her head. They asked casual questions about my will, my bank accounts, whether I'd considered simplifying by signing power of attorney documents. I smiled politely, offered cookies, and gave them nothing. Instead, I seethed. Then came the slip that confirmed my worst fear. One Saturday, as Lily played with Margaret's old dollhouse, Caroline leaned close, her voice honeyed. "Mom, I worry about you rattling around in this big place all alone. Daniel and I have talked, and we think it might be best if we helped you with paperwork, just temporarily, to take the stress off." I sipped my tea, feigning calm. "How would you help?" "Oh, you know," she said breezily. "We could set up joint accounts, help with property management. Daniel could file the legal stuff, just to make sure nothing slips through the cracks." There was the real goal. I looked her dead in the eye. "Nothing is slipping through the cracks, Caroline, except perhaps your conscience." Her smile froze. Daniel quickly changed the subject, but I saw the flash of fury in her eyes. That night, I pulled out Margaret's journal again. Her words echoed, "Blood doesn't always mean loyalty." I realized something then. I had been mourning the daughter I thought I had, not the one standing in front of me. The Caroline who had once braided daisy chains in her hair, who had giggled while helping me bake pies, she was gone. Replaced by someone sharpened by greed and Daniel's influence. It was time to stop clinging to memories. Time to face who they truly were. And time to prepare for the confrontation I knew was coming. I met with Rachel again the following week. "They're circling tighter," I told her. "What do I do when they finally make their move?" She smiled grimly. "You let them, and then you drop the hammer." "I'll be ready." "Drop the hammer?" I asked. "Eleanor," Rachel said, her eyes fierce, "they think you're weak. That's their mistake. We're going to show them just how wrong they are." One evening, as cicadas droned and the sky turned violet, I sat alone in the study, the forged papers spread across the desk before me. My hands no longer shook when I touched them. This wasn't fear anymore. It was fuel. They thought they could declare me incompetent. They thought they could erase me, claim my inheritance, rewrite my life. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. I was Eleanor Whitmore. I had fought for my life once before and survived. Now I was going to fight for my dignity. And this time I wasn't fighting alone. I spent days preparing. Not just the meal, though I roasted a chicken and set Margaret's silver on the dining table. Not just the house, though I polished every surface until it gleamed. I was preparing myself. For 40 years, I had allowed Caroline to dictate the terms of our relationship. I had begged for scraps of attention, swallowed excuses, looked away from her selfishness. But tonight the power would shift. I invited them for Sunday dinner. They accepted immediately, too eagerly. The doorbell rang at precisely 6. Caroline swept in wearing a coral dress, her hair in soft waves. She kissed the air near my cheek as if we were socialites. Daniel followed in a crisp blazer, Lily trailing behind, clutching a stuffed rabbit. "Grandma!" Lily squealed, wrapping her arms around my waist. I bent down, hugging her tight, breathing in the scent of bubblegum shampoo. My heart ached. This child was the only innocent one among us. "Sweetheart, why don't you set your rabbit up at the table? He can have dinner with us," I suggested. She giggled and ran off. Caroline and Daniel exchanged pleased glances, thinking the evening was already going their way. "Smells wonderful, Mom," Caroline said, her voice sugary. "Let's sit," I replied. Dinner began with small talk. Caroline described Lily's recital in lavish detail. Daniel bragged about a high-profile case. I nodded politely, carving chicken, passing potatoes. But as plates emptied, the conversation shifted. "Mom," Caroline began gently, "Daniel and I have been talking. We worry about you here alone in such a big house. It's a lot to manage." Daniel leaned forward. "We think it might be wise for you to consider some safeguards, just to make sure your affairs stay in order." My pulse quickened, but I kept my face calm. "Safeguards? Joint accounts, perhaps," Daniel said smoothly. "Maybe a power of attorney. Purely precautionary." "Ah." I dabbed my lips with a napkin. "You mean handing over control?" Caroline's smile faltered. "Not handing over. Sharing. So you're not overwhelmed." I rose slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood. I walked to the sideboard, opened a drawer, and withdrew the manila envelope. I laid it carefully in the center of the table. "Then maybe you can explain this." Their eyes locked on the envelope. Daniel's jaw tightened. Caroline reached for it with trembling hands. She pulled out the photocopied evaluations, her face blanching as she flipped through the pages. "I found these in my desk," I said, my voice steady. "Evaluations claiming I'm impaired. Recommending guardianship. Forged signatures. Daniel, your handwriting on the envelope. Would either of you like to explain?" Silence filled the room. Even Lily sensed the shift, clutching her rabbit tighter. Finally, Daniel cleared his throat. "Eleanor, you're misunderstanding. Those were drafts, examples. A lawyer friend provided templates in case things worsened after your surgery. We never filed anything." "So you admit they're yours?" I said coldly. He hesitated. Caroline jumped in. "Mom, please. We were scared. You were in critical condition, you live alone, and you smelled money," I cut in. "You saw Margaret's estate and decided I wasn't fit to manage it." Caroline's voice cracked. "That's not true. We just wanted to help." I slammed my hand on the table. The silver rattled. Lily gasped. "Help. Help is driving your mother home after surgery. Help is sitting beside her during rehab. Help is a phone call, a casserole, a visit. Help is not forging papers to steal her life." Caroline's eyes filled with tears. "We made mistakes, but—" I leaned forward, my voice low, dangerous. "No. Mistakes are forgetting to call on a birthday. Mistakes are saying the wrong word. What you did was betrayal. Calculated. Cold." Daniel's mask slipped. "You're overreacting. These are just papers. They mean nothing." "Papers," I said, sliding them back into the envelope, "are evidence, and I've already shown them to a lawyer." His face darkened. "You wouldn't dare." "Oh, I would." The room was heavy with silence. Caroline wiped her eyes, her mascara smudging. "Mom, please think of Lily. She needs her grandmother. Don't let this tear us apart." My gaze softened at my granddaughter, sitting small and frightened at the end of the table. Then I looked back at Caroline. "You already tore us apart," I said, "the moment you chose greed over family." Daniel shoved back his chair. "Come on, Caroline. We're leaving." But Caroline lingered, her voice breaking. "Mom, can't we fix this?" I gathered the envelope in my hands, pressing it flat. "Some things can't be fixed." They left in a storm of slammed doors and raised voices. Lily glanced back once, her eyes wide and confused. When the car roared away, I sank into a chair, trembling. For years I had dreamed of reconciliation. But now I knew the truth. Reconciliation was impossible. They weren't coming back for me. They were coming back for what I had. And I had just made it clear they wouldn't get it. Rachel came the next morning. I showed her the envelope again. You did well, she said, her eyes flashing. You forced them to reveal themselves. I'm scared, I admitted. What if they push harder? They will, Rachel said simply. Desperate people always do. But now we're ready. I'll file preemptive motions. We'll document their attempts. And Eleanor. He squeezed my hand. They underestimated you. That's their fatal mistake. That night, as rain hammered the windows, I sat in Margaret's study, writing in her journal. My words joined hers on the yellowed pages. I will not be erased. I will not be controlled. I am still here. I thought of Lily, her small voice asking if we could fix it. My heart ached for her innocence, her longing for family. But I couldn't sacrifice myself for Caroline's lies. For the first time in years I felt strong. But deep down I knew this battle was only beginning. And the next move would be theirs. The morning after our dinner confrontation, the phone calls began. First, Caroline. Her voice trembled with urgency. Mom, we overreacted last night. We said things we didn't mean. Please, let's talk again. Don't let lawyers come between us. I listened in silence before hanging up. An hour later, Daniel called. His tone was sharp, commanding. Eleanor, you don't understand the consequences of dragging this into court. It will ruin reputations. Caroline's, Lily's. Think about your granddaughter before you make a mistake. I almost laughed. The man who forged documents lecturing me about consequences. I hung up again. By evening, both of them were calling back to back, leaving voicemails that swung from apologies to threats. I stopped answering altogether. 2 days later, Helen knocked on my door looking troubled. Ellie, I need to tell you something, she said, stepping inside. She perched on the edge of my sofa, her hands twisting in her lap. Caroline cornered me at the grocery store. Said she's worried about you. Claimed you're paranoid, that you imagine plots against you. She asked if I'd noticed you acting unstable. The words stabbed like a knife. Helen shook her head. I told her I've never met anyone more sharp. But Ellie, she's spreading this everywhere. If she convinces enough people, it could get dangerous. I pressed a hand to my chest. They won't stop, Helen. They can't accept that the estate is out of their reach. Helen's eyes narrowed. Then you fight fire with fire. And I'll stand beside you. Rachel filed the first motion that week. A protective petition affirming my competence with sworn statements from doctors, neighbors, and community members. But the harassment didn't stop. My mailbox filled with anonymous pamphlets about protecting seniors from fraud. Flyers appeared on my doorstep advertising assisted living centers. At first, I thought it was coincidence. But then I noticed Daniel's handwriting scrawled on one of the envelopes. The final straw came when Lily's school counselor called. Mrs. Whitmore, your daughter mentioned you might not be well. She implied there could be issues with memory or safety. We're obligated to ask, are you able to provide a safe environment for your granddaughter during visits? I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles whitened. Visits? Caroline hasn't let me see Lily in almost 2 years. The counselor sounded uneasy. I see. Well, if anything changes, please know we take concerns seriously. I hung up and collapsed into a chair. They weren't just trying to strip my independence. They were using Lily as leverage. Rachel was furious when I told her. This is textbook manipulation, she snapped. They're creating a narrative. The fragile old woman who can't be trusted. But Eleanor, you've got more proof on your side. Stay calm. Document everything. And don't confront them directly again. We'll use the system. But Daniel didn't believe in systems. He believed in pressure. One Friday night, I was reading in the parlor when I heard footsteps on the porch. The security light flicked on. Through the lace curtains, I saw a shadow, tall, broad-shouldered. Daniel. The doorknob rattled. My heart pounded. I grabbed the phone and dialed 911. This is Eleanor Whitmore. My son-in-law is trying to break into my house. I have a restraining petition filed. The dispatcher kept me calm until sirens wailed down the street. By the time officers arrived, Daniel was gone. But muddy footprints stained the porch, proof of his presence. The police took my statement. We'll increase patrols, one officer promised. And you should consider cameras if you don't have them already. I nodded. But inside, fear battled with fury. They wanted me scared. They wanted me silent. I would give them neither. Helen came the next morning with coffee and a notebook. "We're documenting everything," she declared. "Time, date, what happened. If they breathe near you, we'll have it on record." We sat at my kitchen table, writing down every call, every pamphlet, every whisper. The notebook grew thick with evidence. Meanwhile, Rachel worked quietly, filing restraining orders and alerting the court to Daniel's behavior. "They're cornered," she told me. "That makes them dangerous. But it also means they're close to collapse." He was right. The storm was breaking. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. It was a humid Saturday evening. I was upstairs folding laundry when a crash shattered the silence. Glass exploding. I froze. Heart hammering. Slowly I crept to the landing. Below, in the foyer, shards of my stained glass window glittered on the floor. And stepping through the jagged opening was Caroline. Her hair was wild, her eyes red-rimmed, her dress clinging with sweat. She looked nothing like the polished woman who had breezed into my life weeks earlier. "Mom," she shouted, her voice hoarse. "We need to talk." I grabbed the phone. "You're trespassing. The police are already on their way." Tears streaked down her face. "Please don't do this. We just want to help." "Help?" My voice cracked like a whip. "You broke into my home." She stumbled toward the stairs. "We didn't mean for it to go this far." Daniel said, we thought." Her words dissolved into sobs. I stood tall, clutching the banister. "Caroline, you chose your path. You chose lies. You chose greed. You left me when I was fighting for my life, and now you come crawling through broken glass for money. That's not help. That's betrayal." Her sobs turned to rage. "You're destroying this family." "The family was destroyed the moment you decided my money was worth more than my dignity," I said coldly. Sirens wailed in the distance. Blue lights flickered against the broken window. Caroline collapsed on the floor, crying as officers stormed in. They pulled her gently to her feet, cuffed her trembling hands, and read her rights. She screamed my name as they led her out. I closed my eyes, the echo of her voice rattling through the house that Margaret had left me. But I felt no guilt, only grief. Rachel arrived within the hour, her heels clicking across the foyer as she surveyed the shattered glass. "Well," she said grimly, "they've just made our case ironclad. What happens now?" I asked softly. "Caroline will face charges, breaking and entering violation of restraining orders. Daniel will try to spin it, but this time there's video evidence. And Eleanor," she touched my arm, "you're safe. They've overplayed their hand." I nodded, staring at the jagged edges of the window, the shards glittering like tears on the floor. Safe. The word felt strange in my mouth, because I knew this wasn't the end. Families like Caroline and Daniel's didn't surrender easily. And I wasn't finished either. Caroline's arrest sent shockwaves through Charleston's polished neighborhoods. Whispers spread quickly, at the cafe, at the market, even in church pews. The perfect daughter who once glowed in cocktail dresses was now remembered for smashing a stained glass window and screaming in handcuffs. Daniel tried to contain the damage. He showed up at my door 3 days later, his suit rumpled, his charm cracked. "Eleanor, we need to talk," he said, his voice lower, desperate. I stepped onto the veranda, leaving the door locked behind me. "You have 2 minutes." His eyes darted around as though neighbors might overhear. "Drop the charges, please." Caroline wasn't herself. The stress, the heat, she broke. "If this goes to trial, it will ruin her. And Lily," he swallowed. "Think of Lily." I folded my arms. "Did you think of Lily when you forged those papers? When you spread lies about me being unstable? When you sent your wife crashing through my window?" He winced. "We made mistakes." "No, Daniel. Mistakes are accidents. What you did was calculated. And now you'll pay for it." His voice hardened. "If you take this to court, the whole family will be destroyed." I leaned closer, my voice like steel. "You destroyed this family the day you chose greed over love." I turned and went back inside, locking the door behind me. The hearings moved quickly. Rachel was relentless, presenting every scrap of evidence. The forged evaluations, the witness statements, the police report, the security footage of Caroline shattering glass. The judge's words still ring in my ears. The petition for guardianship is denied. The protective order is granted. All claims of Eleanor Whitmore's incapacity are baseless. Daniel sat stiff in his chair, jaw clenched. Caroline wept silently beside him. The judge continued, "Any further harassment or attempts to interfere will result in criminal charges and forfeiture of inheritance rights." I almost laughed. Inheritance rights, what they had clawed so desperately to secure, were now out of their reach entirely. News of the ruling spread faster than I expected. Daniel's firm quietly dropped him, citing reputational concerns. Clients stopped calling. By autumn, their house in Mount Pleasant was listed for sale, the glossy photos unable to hide the cracks. Caroline moved in with her in-laws for a while. Rumor had it the marriage splintered soon after. Whispers of divorce echoed through the grapevine, though I didn't ask for details. Their collapse wasn't my triumph. It was simply the price of betrayal. One evening, weeks later, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. "Grandma." The small voice nearly broke me. "Lily." My throat tightened. Dad left his phone on the counter. "I found your number." She hesitated. "Are you mad at me?" My chest ached. "Oh, sweetheart. Never at you. They said you don't want to see us anymore. That you hate us." Tears blurred my vision. "No, baby. I love you more than anything. It's your parents I can't trust. Not you." Silence. Then softly, "I miss you. I miss the pancakes shaped like animals." I pressed the phone to my heart, wishing I could pull her through the line. "I miss you too, Lily. Someday when it's safe, we'll make pancakes again. I promise." The line clicked dead. She must have been caught. I sat in the quiet house, tears sliding down my cheeks. For all the strength I had shown, this was the wound that never healed. The loss of a granddaughter caught in the crossfire. Months passed. Life took on a rhythm again. Morning coffee on the veranda. Evenings spent with Helen, who became more family than Caroline ever was. Rachel stopped by sometimes with case updates, her smile satisfied each time she reminded me, "They can't touch you anymore." I joined a book club, planted herbs in the garden, even volunteered at the Historical Society, cataloging Margaret's antique collection. The silence that once haunted me now felt like freedom. On the 1-year anniversary of my surgery, I wrote a check for $50,000 to the local hospital, earmarked for patients recovering alone with no family support. When I handed it to the director, I said, "No one should ever sit in a waiting room and wonder if they matter." He clasped my hands, tears in his eyes. For the first time I felt whole. Then on my 65th birthday, Helen surprised me with a small gathering on my veranda. A few neighbors, a cake, laughter drifting across the Charleston night. As the candles flickered, I closed my eyes. I didn't wish for reconciliation. I didn't wish for the past. I wished for peace. When I opened my eyes, Helen raised her glass. "To Eleanor, proof that family is chosen, not given." We clinked glasses, and for the first time in years I felt at home. Sometimes I think about Caroline and Daniel. Where they ended up, what stories they tell themselves to sleep at night. Do they blame me, or do they ever look in the mirror? I don't know. I don't need to know. Because here's what I've learned. Blood may bind us, but actions define us. And betrayal always carries a price. My daughter and her husband lost everything chasing my estate. But I gained something greater than they could ever steal. My dignity, my peace, and the freedom to live without fear. And as for Lily, one day when she's old enough, she'll find her way back. Love like ours doesn't vanish. It waits. Until then, I will be here, on this veranda, watching the sun dip below Charleston's rooftops, sipping tea, knowing I survived not just illness, but the cruelest cut of all, abandonment. And I lived to tell the story. Now I ask you listening, what would you have done in my place? Would you forgive, or would you shut the door for good? Tell me in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from. I want to see just how far the truth of betrayal can travel. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next story. I promise there are more twists to come.